So once upon a time, or whatever, in the magical land of Landia, there was a kingdom whose name was way too long to fit on paper, so everyone just called it the BP Kingdom. This kingdom was where all of the cool knights went. Yeah. So in this magical kingdom, there lived a handsome, courageous, and charming knight by the name of Sir Knightington. Heh, just kidding. He was a peasant, and his name was Scott. So one day, Scott was watering some flowers, when suddenly, one of the Queen's messengers approached him and was like, "Hey, are you Scott?" And Scott was like, "Yeah." And then the messenger was like, "Well, the Queen needs to see you, so let's go!" So they went to the castle and met with the Queen of the BP Kingdom. And the Queen was all like, "Hey, are you Scott?" And then Scott was like, "Yeah." And then the Queen was like, "Good, because we need your help. We had a magical fountain that supplied us with endless iPads," we just called it the magical iPad fountain, "and it's been stolen by some evil people over in the Forbidden O Kingdom." O Kingdom. And so the Queen was like, "Yeah, we need you to get our iPads back." And then Scott was like, "Okay." And then he was like, "Well, wait, don't I need, like, a weapon or a horse or something to help me out here?" And then the Queen was like, "No, but you get a Malala book? Yo, okay." So Scott was like, "Okay." And then Scott, headed out on his journey. He set out on his long and treacherous journey through plains, canyons, clouds. Because, clouds, that's something normal people do, because why not? And while he was in these clouds, he met a magical creature who was half kitty, half unicorn. It was a Unikitty. So then Unikitty was like, "Oh hey, I see that you're embarking on a little magical quest there. Mind if I tag along?" And then Scott was like, "Okay." So Scott and Unikitty went on their magical journey together and ended up in the magical forest of mystery. I did not drag that name out. There's literally like 5 Y's in the name. I didn't name the place, I swears. So then Unikitty was like, "Don't worry, Scott. We can find you a magical weapon. You see, there's a sword and a stone here, and JK, the sword is gone." And then Unikitty was like, "Wait, what?" Yeah, plot twist. The sword was gone. Somebody else took it at some point. Who knows? So after Unikitty was done raging, Scott was like, "Oh, no big deal. We can just do this without the sword." And then Unikitty was like, "Okay." So the two of them continued their journey to the magical lake of Fog Lake Lantis. They were so creative with their names back then. And suddenly, out of the water arose a giant sea serpent. And then this crazy sea serpent was all like, "Oh, hi." And then Scott was like, "Oh, hey, do you think we can have a ride to the Forbidden No Kingdom?" And then the sea serpent was like, "Sure thing, bro." And then, so the sea serpent was taking Scott and Unikitty across the lake when suddenly something caught Scott's eye. Oh my gosh, it was a sword! I mean, sure, it was like a pretty useless overall sword, but Scott loved it anyways. So we named the sword the He Loved It Anyway sword. So the sea serpent dropped Scott and Unikitty off at the Forbidden O Kingdom, where they met the evil ruler of the O Kingdom. And he was all like, "Ha ha 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 ha. Yeah, we stole your magical iPad fountain, but we're not going to give it back, because we stole it. Yeah." And then he was so evil that he used his dark magic and broke Scott's He Loved It Anyway sword, which in turn broke his heart. And then Unikitty was like, "Scott, we still got this. Use the magic Malala book." And then Scott was like, "Okay." And then just the overall power of this Malala book of education and women's rights and inspiration was enough to vanquish the evil creatures in the O Kingdom and victory. Woo. So Scott and Unikitty returned to the BP Kingdom, where the Queen was like, "Hey, thanks so much for getting our iPad fountain back." And then Scott was like, "No problem." So now what? And then the Queen was like, "I don't know, just go home, I guess." And then Scott was like, "Okay." And then Scott and Unikitty went home and watered some flowers. And they all lived happily ever after. The end.